Welcome to Key Tech. Please describe this channel if you are interested in today's video. According to the latest news from the Global Times, TSMC is communicating with the United States on chip subsidy rules. The main reason for this is the so-called chip subsidies in the United States. There are many poison pill clauses, and it is a trap for global semiconductor manufacturers to get into it. To build a factory, I originally wanted to rely on huge subsidies from the United States to make up for the high cost of building a factory in the United States. But now it seems that the so-called chip subsidy plan in the United States is simply full of poison pill clauses, which also makes TSMC and Samsung and other semiconductor giants dare not speak out. So what exactly does the poison pill clause refer to? How much loss did TSMC and Samsung suffer? According to the Wall Street Journal of the United States, U.S. President Biden will implement the 2022 Chip and Science Act with a scale of $280 billion, of which about $200 billion will be used for scientific research, and another $52.7 billion will be provided to the chip industry. Subsidies, that is to say, subsidize giants such as TSMC and Samsung who go to the United States to build factories. The rest of the money is used for investment tax credits for chip companies, including funding for the new construction and expansion of chip manufacturing facilities and technology research and development, and workforce training. The so-called poison pill clause is that in order to prevent China from profiting from chip subsidies, the United States requires companies that go to the United States to build factories to submit detailed guidelines when applying for subsidies, including general operating information such as the overall investment and financing plan, and even more. It is also necessary to submit sensitive core business secrets such as the yield rate of semiconductors. In addition, manufacturers who go to the United States to build factories cannot cooperate with China, let alone build new factories in China, and cannot use this to help China increase chip production capacity. It seems that the United States has made it clear that it wants to confront China. So what is going on? As we all know, China is now the world's largest chip market. The United States does not allow companies that apply for subsidies to cooperate with China, let alone build factories in China, to help China increase chip production capacity. This will undoubtedly make these companies give up the world's largest chip market. According to data released by a U.S. think tank, the United States has almost zero manufacturing capacity in the field of cutting-edge logic chips. Most of the high-end chips are produced in Taiwan and South Korea. Taiwan's TSMC accounts for 67%, and South Korea's Samsung. The ratio is also as high as 31%. It can be said that the global high-end chip market is almost completely monopolized by TSMC and Samsung. There is a huge market space for demand. However, the United States does not allow TSMC and Samsung to build factories in China to increase chip production capacity, which means that both TSMC and Samsung will lose more market share in the field of mature process chips. Samsung and Samsung also suffered heavy losses, especially the cost of building a factory in the United States is higher than imagined. For example, TSMC originally only invested $40 billion in the construction of the factory, and then added an additional $4 billion, a total of $44 billion in new factories in the United States. Samsung also spent $8 billion more than expected to build a new factory in the United States. Indeed, for example, South Korea's Samsung Electronics had an estimated investment of $17.3 billion in a factory in Texas. But it turned out to have an additional investment of $8 billion because of the US poison pill clause. The same is true for TSMC, which invested in Arizona. The amount is $40 billion. But what TSMC never expected is that due to the chip rules issued by the United States, TSMC's cost has further increased, and finally had to invest an additional $4 billion. Jong Jongmu also stood up and said that $4 billion it may not be enough, and it may increase to $5 billion in the future. So why is this? In fact, it is mainly the so-called chip bill in the United States. There is a special regulation in it, that is, giant companies that require to build factories in the United States must establish free kindergartens near the factories. Companies going to the United States to build factories attract more chip-related talents. Because there are free kindergartens, these talents will come to work nearby. But in fact, whether it is TSMC or Samsung recruiting talents, they need to pay for their own training. For these employees, this is another considerable expense. The combination of the two expenses has led to further increases in the construction costs of both TSMC and Samsung. China does not know whether the United States will continue to increase the poison pill clause in the future, but one thing is certain, is that because of the poison pill clause in the US CHIP Act, they have no way to make up for their losses through subsidies. On the contrary, they have increased more. Factory construction costs now can be said to be a dilemma. Continuing to build factories in the United States means continuing to increase investment and construction costs. If you choose to withdraw at this time, then the funds invested in the United States will be completely drained. Piao. I have to say that the United States is really abominable, and now TSMC and Samsung are deeply involved in it. Therefore, foreign media unanimously claim that the so-called US chip subsidies are simply a trap. What do you think for this? Welcome to leave a message to discuss in the comment area.